Good morning. Sorry, I was looking for my headphones.
That's all right.
That were in the first place that I looked for them.
Always.
Then I had to go back to them.
Oh, amazing. So
Right.
we're officially addressing you as Reverend Gail Loveshock now.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. I know.
It's so exciting. I listened back to the last podcast we did, which came out in January. We've recorded it in December 2018. It came out in January 2019.
Gosh.
It seems like such a long time ago, but also seems like 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, totally.
And then it was interesting as well to see the things that we'd spoken about in that podcast to how your life looks like right now.
My God, I'll need to listen to it myself, actually. Yeah. What were some of the things that you noticed?
So one of the things that we had spoken about was you moving back to Scotland. And it was going to happen in the next couple of years. And it was less than a year that you were back up here, because we met up in real life.
Yeah.
Got to actually see and touch each other.
Oh.
Had tea and scones. Yeah, and here you are, back in the motherland.
Oh, so good. It's so good. I'm so happy to be home, and I really think if I was still in Worthing during this phase of independent retreat, I think my mental health would have been in a different place.
Yeah.
So I think even that in and of itself is just, there's such a gift to have listened. And I caught up with a friend last week that I probably haven't spoken to maybe for 6 or 7 months, and she was saying, could you not have told the rest of us that like the plague and the apocalypse were coming and that you knew about it?
Where would the fun in that have been?
I know, exactly. We're on our own path. There you are.
There you are, and there I am. That's one of the reasons that I'd gone back and listened to the podcast was when I was looking at your Instagram recently and thinking about this podcast that we're recording just now. It's like, Gail just seems to really have settled more. Like, you just felt really more at home within yourself and your life and everything. And it might just be because I've been following you for longer and I've got to know you. But then when I listened back to that podcast, something else that you had said was one of the reasons that you wanted to move back here was because you felt like something was missing.
Yeah. I know, and it's true. And I let that feeling of something being missing like exist for so much longer than was necessary, because the only person that was really stopping me moving home was me in a weird way. And then yeah, it does feel like that, like it is being back on the motherland, like it is being back at home. It is even, I think we spoke about this when maybe even on the podcast or when we met up, but even just people that sound like we sound, that there's just, that everybody speaks the dialect and the colloquialism and the sense of humour and the patter and the banter and, all these wee things that, there's just like the English cloak isn't needed in any way, shape or form, and part of me is that I am a chameleon and always will be, for sure, and that makes me able to dip in and out of all the different rooms and spaces and places. But yeah, there's just nothing like being at home, essentially. And that's and integrating as we did. We made a big thing about we didn't make a big thing, that's not the right language. It was really important to become part of like local community, so Scottish country dancing, for example, and the hikers club and things like that. So just full of retired elder wand magicians, basically, choosing what they want to do with their time, how they want to do it. I mean, all of them amazing, engineers, teachers, brain surgeons, neuroscientists in their days, still with all of that magic in their mind, and just great doses of humor, and just being completely enchanted by like two young people, James and I. They're all like 70 plus, coming along and wanting to get involved because they're traditions. Like the walks and the lands are traditions known to people that have walked them for decades. The steps of Scottish country dancing have been with us for hundreds of years and have saved, you know, many of our stories.
Yeah.
So, you know, kind of all of that as well, like remembering everything from somewhere in the back of your brain at country dancing and stuff like that. You know, like you've definitely done it at school, but it being somewhere else. And also just the community of it, and the difference as well in what wealth means here, I think, compared to what it means particularly in the south of England and London. So, you know, Scottish country dancing, a few quid a week or something like that for class, and, you know, for 20p at the break you can get a cup of tea and a biscuit, you know.
It's like, is that even covering the costs?
No, it's just this amazing thing, you know, like the walking association, £40 a year, you know, and a couple of quid a week for petrol, then, you know, and that'll return and that'll come back. But it just being, you're not taking more than you need, you know. It's circular living, you know, in a way, you know, that and that for me, I was like, oh yes, righty ho. And even the wee businesses that are, you know, that are in Helensburgh, like there's a gorgeous French cafe and there's a great crystal shop and there's an amazing spiritualist church, and you know, and you know, and it just is. There's a great lingerie shop that my gran used to shop in, you know, that's been there for donkeys. So there's all these wee things that are just, that are just home, you know, that are just home. And so then I think that part of me that was unsettled and sort of trying to find it none of that's needed anymore because I'm here. And so it's just, you know, it's a lot, it's just a lot more straightforward.
That's what we want life to be.
Oh my God, yeah, I'm just so here for simplicity. Yeah, simplicity, circular living, you know, just a completely different perspective on prosperity and abundance, I think, as well. And also as a reverend now, so having completed ministry training, you know, being ordained in July of last year, again, you know, Church of Scotland is obviously very prevalent here. And indeed, I think there's four churches related to Catholicism. There's also a Buddhist church, or what was a church that's been taken over by Tibetan Buddhist monks here. So in a really small geographical location, you've got interfaith woven left, right, and centre. And again, everybody's so open. And what I really like about, again, older people is they never ask you what you do. It's a lovely thing. That was one of the big things. Like, it was weeks and weeks before anybody. I think they just thought James and I just appeared from something.
That's by magic. Maybe they know that they don't. That's why they don't need to ask, because they just know that you're there by magic.
Yeah, totally. And so
they have that wisdom.
And it was so amazing because I thought none of us. It's just all about in the moment and the presence. You know, so if you're getting in the car and, you know, as we were sort of before Christmas, like driving, or, you know, the start of the year off for an 8-hour hike or a walk, you're just talking about the walk and what you're looking out for, and, you know, one thing and another. And then again, the history of it, the land of it, the poetry, the songs, the people that have walked there. Like, who cares what the day job is, if that makes sense, or the title. So a huge amount of freedom. Also in that, which I really think we go through phases and we go through seasons, don't we? And I think when you're in your autumn and your winter, you know, how you spend your time currency changes.
Yeah.
You know, who you spend it with becomes different, and what's important, because actually the thing that I've realized about any, you know, kind of death and near-death experiences is that actually they just remind us that we haven't chosen to live yet. You know, and for me, that is one of the biggest spiritual takeaways of like what's happening at the moment, is the reason, you know, we're seeing people being uncomfortable with death because they've never chosen to live. So then all that stuff comes up, like, oh my God, I didn't have time to do this, I didn't say that, I didn't tell that person I loved them, I didn't go on that adventure, am I ever going to get to do that? So it's like a global death meditation, you
Yeah.
know, that's happening. And so I think for me as well, there's something really interesting in moving home as well. I chose, without it sounding like train spotting, but I chose life, you
Yeah.
know, and that there's a massive difference in and then what starts to unfurl, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Totally. And I really hope that that's the message that people get
Mm,
from this situation, is that we do need to choose life. Like, it's such a good line.
yeah,
It's a
yeah.
good movie too, but but yeah, because too many people, there's so many people that I know that are now homeschooling,
Mhm, mhm,
that have now got partners at home
mhm,
most of the day where they never had before,
mhm,
and they're like, I don't want that to go back to the way it was, where you were only seeing people as you were heading off to bed. The kids maybe
mhm,
never saw their parents never saw the kids because they were
mhm,
only there to maybe tuck them in at night.
mhm.
And there's so many questions about what do they want their future to look like, and so that's bringing up other questions like, are they good enough to homeschool and various other things. But my question is the school system enough to educate all
Mm.
your children? Because it suits some but not all.
I think that's really important. I think that's really important. And actually, you know, we know like the Nordics, Sweden and etc., that, you know, forest schools until you're 7, because,
Yeah.
you know, the most unnatural thing I think is to ask a child to sit still, to ask an adult to sit still. It's such a weird thing. You know, we're trained in move, do anything, you can have anything, be anything, play, play, play. And then, you know, 4 or 5, you might get dunked in a hard chair and you're supposed to sit there for the rest of your life. But when Nicola Sturgeon, you know, was speaking, I don't know if it was well, was it earlier last week, I think, and she was talking about an outdoor schooling model, you know, saying like we can't go back to, you know, we can't, how do we go forward to a way that incorporates all the benefits of what we've seen? So increased imagination, increased play, actually increased communication, receptivity, a more tender parenting in the majority of environments. And I thought, that's, you know, that's a mother that's suggesting that, you know, yes, she's a prime minister, but also, you know, that's a woman that's really noticing what's happening with children. And again, I think globally that's also what we're seeing, that the mature feminine, the healthy feminine leadership, you know, that can come through any gender, but we're predominantly seeing that coming through women that as identify as women.
Yeah.
You know, particularly like, you know, the New Zealand Prime Minister doing, oh, my favourite press conference, you know, yes, the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy are essential workers.
Of course.
I mean, hello. I'm in love with you forever for that. That's amazing. So yeah, I sort of, that's my hope too, that again we'll choose life, we'll choose circular living, we'll choose connection, we'll understand how we are all connected, you know, we'll understand that after death there is rebirth, you know, and that's the bit that we're also missing, the third of the holy three, as it were, you know, because we forget about the resurrection and the rebirth through any you know, well, factual or mythical, you know, kind of telling of those tales. But yeah, there feels like there is an opportunity for a different type of peace and a different type of economy as well. You know, it's because as we, you know, Jeff of Amazon is about to become, you know, the founder of Amazon. He's about to become the first trillionaire. So
Yeah.
it's not that there isn't money. There's more money than there's ever been, and it's still being printed.
Yeah, and I saw somewhere that he earned something like $30 billion in a month. It's like, can't. And I remember also seeing like what the difference, somebody put the difference in time of a
Mm-hmm.
million versus a billion to give you an idea, because they're just words.
Yes.
And you can't get your head around what that was.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the difference between like a year and 2,700 years.
Wow.
It was like, if he spent, I think it was £1,000 a day, it would take him 2,790 years just to have gone through that 30 billion. Something insane like that. And we were just like, what for?
I know. It's so
Like,
interesting. Yeah. And I think we've seen so much of that, you know, when Notre Dame, obviously when that burnt down, you know, 1 billion being raised in a day, which is nothing if you're existing in billions and trillions. The same amount of money would clean every ocean. You know, it would only take 1 billion, you know, to clean the ocean and for us to get you know, basically our most important resource, you know, completely nourished again. But it's true. It's like the numbers don't make any sense. I was in a supermarket, you know, the other day, and it was so peaceful. It was just so lovely. And I'm also really here for having personal space. I love not having somebody breathing down my neck in the queue whilst I get my shopping, you know. And I'm really here for that. And I was chatting, and it's lovely because I was chatting to the first week a lady, and I was saying, how are you all doing? Like, thanks so much. And she was like, we're actually wonderful. She said the customers are being so patient and lovely. She said, I don't know if you've noticed, but you can actually hear the music because people are quiet. You know, she said, we've had a delivery of plants. She was like, so I popped out on my break and bought loads of plants to put in the garden. She was like, because I haven't got anything else to spend my money on. And she was like, we've all got more money. And I was like, isn't that wonderful? And she was like, it is. And she said, I feel a bit strange saying it, you know. And she said, I've got people who are also ill. And she said, but, you know, she said, I know they're going to get better and it's going to be okay. And I was just like, well, thank you very much, like checkout guru. That was a delight.
Yeah, my mum said that she noticed that when she was at the supermarket, that all the staff seemed much happier and much more positive. And it's just been, everybody's just looking after each other so much better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we've all remembered that that's a person.
I know.
That's not just that's not just something that fires your shopping at you. You try to catch it as quickly as you can. It's an actual, there is a human being sitting in front of you, and you put your phone down and you engage with that person and you talk to that person.
Absolutely.
Because for many people, that's the only person that you get to talk to all day.
Absolutely. I know.
And you appreciate it so much.
I know. It's like the checkout folk have become like, you know, like hairdressers or the therapists of the beauty world. It's like the checkout folk have become that. And even actually last weekend, when I went to get grocery shopping, there was a lovely man who served me, and he did ask me, he was like, are you working, you know, how is it for you? And I said, well, I'm an interfaith minister, I'm a reverend. So I said, actually, I said, I've never been busier. I said, it's a very full time. And I said, I think people are recognizing that if they, you know, that it's not all about organized religion, that spiritual counsel is the opportunity for somebody to witness you, because exactly as you're saying there, you might only talk to one person, you know, in a day or a week or whatever it is. And actually what we're also not seeing at the moment is nobody's witnessing us. So if we do live alone, we're dipping into that mystical pool of who is my witness, you know, who is the mighty companion or companions that know that I'm here and will tell my stories and again, you know, that know I'm making these things. And he was also really lovely because again, he was just like, oh my gosh, he was like, God bless a young woman like you choosing a job like that. And I said, oh, I was like, honestly, I said, it chose me. I said, we just rendezvoused at a very particular point when you know, it was all as it was supposed to be. And he said, well, that makes me very happy. He was like, I've been Church of Scotland my whole life. And he said, but to think of a young person, and I loved it. I'm like, I'll be 42. Thank you so much. I am a young person, thank you. You know, he was like, to think of you like giving counsel to people, he was like, that brings me great peace. And he was like, I'll hold you in my prayers tonight. He was like, that's lovely. And I just thought, that's a blessing.
Yeah.
I don't need anybody in a you know, a dog collar to bless me. That man just did, you know,
Yeah.
again at the checkout.
Yeah.
Mm,
Another checkout guru.
I know.
That's where they are.
I know.
That's where they are. The wisdom behind the till.
The wisdom behind the tale. Oh my God, that's a play, surely, that needs to be written.
The tales of lockdown.
Thank you, that's amazing.
So something else that I noticed that you do a lot of rituals,
Mhm, mhm.
a lot of like Celtic rituals and witchy kind of lotions and potions and bringing all that magic. And magic's a word that you use a lot in the language when you're writing and when you're speaking on your Instagram stories. Is that all? Do you feel that's all like your ancestral heritage?
I do. It's always been with me, you know, from being that wee kid that made, you know, rose petal potions and tried to
Yeah.
convince all my aunties they were perfume and they should buy them from me.
That as well. I would go down to my neighbours and chat the door and sell it to them.
Um, and it was funny as well. I was remembering, you know, at Halloween when I was a kid, I took Halloween very seriously because it meant I got to publicly dress as a witch, and I always had to have a pointy hat. And I was quite particular about it as a child, actually. And I was remembering that the other day. I've been remembering a lot. It's been quite lovely. So absolutely the Celtic lineage and being back on Scottish soil, and I do speak about magic a lot because I believe in it, and I spell magic with a K because that is the old ways. You know, magic with a C is stage magic and illusion.
Okay.
And it can sometimes be, you know, with a C, if you go down through, you know, Wiccan is referred to as a religious path. So if you were taking a formal, you know, a formal route, you know, we've seen an enormous springing up of sort of fashion, small f in inverted commas, of witchcraft, but it comes with a lot of craft that I've seen in recent years sort of comes with a bit too many pastel colours for me, and again it is a sort of and so it's fledgling magic, and that's fine, and we must begin somewhere, you know, we must begin somewhere. But for me, again, it's everyday ritual, and it's everyday magic. And when we moved to this particular property, which somehow was built in 1750, with money that I can't work out where it came from, considering we'd just gone through the Highland clearings and were a few years out of Culloden,
Yeah.
and we would have all been in hiding, you know, and all sorts of weird things would have been going on, you know, as the British threw us off our land, and you know, and took it for queen and country in inverted commas. You know, there's this space has got some real oomph in it as well. And actually, when we moved here and we walked in, I just had this sensation of there being more than the human residents that were you know in the property. So I was like,
Yeah.
oh, hello. and and then, you know, one of the things I said to the landlady, just as we were sort of finished having a wee look around, I was like, oh, I said, I like your non-human residents. I said, they're very nice too. And she was like, I knew you'd get it. She said, I knew. She was like, she said, when I saw your email signature, she was like, she's going to be fine. She's going to be
Yeah.
fine, you know. And so absolutely everyday ritual, which is really simple things as well, because all the magic that's in the world and all the spiritual rituals that are in the world, there is also a level of colonization with that too. There's also, you know, a level of taking and misappropriating ritual and tools from other lineages that don't make actually any sense to me. So they've unless I've studied with a teacher from the land that the magic or the medicine comes from, it does, for me personally, it doesn't feel, I'm loath to use the word authentic, but it doesn't actually feel appropriate for
Yeah.
me to use it personally. So coming back to the Celtic magic, coming back to the, you know, the old ways has been really empowering and really expansive. And it will be things like, you know, I rarely would burn sage or Palo Santo or sweetgrass, for example, but I would open a window. You know what I mean? And it's just like, and people are like, but where's the ritual in that? And I'm like, the ritual is you let the fresh air in. That's, you know, you open the door. Sweeping, for example, you know, my husband bought me this amazing, like, kind of witches sort of broom styly thing, and sweeping is such old magic. You know, you sweep, and so on and so forth. Salt around the doors, for example, salt around the perimeter of the house. And even on our front door, I hang 3 wee bells, because that's really old Celtic magic. And basically, if there's any spirits that are about, they don't like going past the bells, because they make sound. So, and I would also clear a space by dinging bells or clapping or singing into corners and things like that, just as we would have done for centuries. And what grows here, you know, are our roses and our rosemary, even our, you know, dandelions and daisies, and the trees that we have, you know, anything that has always been here. You know, even Caledonian pine, etc., things like that. You know, there's so much that's just here. You know, nettles, nettle soup, nettle tea. Again, all the stuff that we might sort of, it's interesting, we might have thought of it before as cheap, which I think there's a really interesting thing around what's moving, especially in spiritual magical terms. Some people might be like, well, why would you go picking dandelions? You know, why don't you just buy it? And it's like, because you become the hands that alchemize it. And that's the power. So that is really, for me, I feel like I've gone through a massive alchemical transformation, which is about just remembering what's in my cells, you know. And spells are words, and we must speak them very, very carefully, because we're either casting ourselves into a life of freedom and love and creativity and joy, or we're casting ourselves into a prison of our own making. So we have to be careful with, you know, what we speak also.
I was listening to Ram Dass this morning, and he was telling a story. He was talking about mantras, and he was telling a story about, it was, I think, a monk was giving a talk on mantras, and somebody had stood up and said, "This is absolute rubbish. Don't be ridiculous. This is all woo, like kind of woo-woo stuff." And the monk had turned around and gone, "You're an ass." And the guy got really enraged by it and shouting, and he went, "It's interesting how those words you're allowing to play around in your head and that energy that they've given you. So why would the opposite not be true?" I was like, oh, that is so important, because some mantras and chanting is something that I've been trying to work with recently. And I'd said to my teacher who'd given me the mantra to chant, I was like, I'm really struggling with it. I feel like I'm just going through the motions of it. And he was like, well, let's just tweak it a little bit and just do part of it and see how that feels. But when I came back to sit down and do it the next time, I was drawn to just repeat the whole mantra instead of part of it. And then I started feeling better about it again. It's like, it's maybe just that the ego in me that trying to rebel out of it, trying to push it away, go, this isn't going to work for me. Whereas one of the Buddhist monks that I was at a lecture with said, no meditation is is a wasted meditation. Even if you sit in it and feel that was rubbish, it's better than not having done it at all. So I've just stuck with it and going with it, and I've started feeling better about it again, because I'm like, oh no, this does make me feel good.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, as a friend said to me the other day, because I was talking about sanctuary, which is my my Wednesday night gathering, an hour of retreat, or an hour of mysteries basically, and magic. It depends what you'll get something, whatever you're there for. And I had said, when I'd moved home, I had in meditation, I just got Wednesday nights, 1 hour, put it in your diary. And I was like, okay. Now this happens to me quite a lot anyway. And the message I've been having for this, literally all of May, is September. Every day I just hear September, and I'm like, you're going to have to give me more at some point. Like, you're going to have to let me know. Yes, I'm like, okay. But there's something about also, when we whisper commitment over our practice, and we choose discipline as a path of devotion. And we choose discipline as a path of love, and the Venusian path, the path of love that I would absolutely say that I walk is being born through the devotional mother. The mother, the healthy mother archetype, and as I move more and more through this and into this work, and this will become more of my work, the maiden to mother to crone, the triple goddess. This is also absolutely as a ripple of returning to Scotland and of kind of remembering my magic. But the cherishing mother, but absolutely will speak of being born through devotion, and devotion is commitment and discipline, but just in slightly softer language. And I never had any problems. I like the word discipline, I like the word commitment, I like the sense of consistency that inspires, and at the moment I'm just in the second day of a 21 day journey with cacao with a good friend of mine, Rebecca Sharman, and it's just it's just because she's a really soft plant medicine, definitely not grown in Scotland.
Unfortunately not.
but definitely, definitely part of that Venusian pathway, that devotion of cherishment, tenderness, love, good feeling thoughts, good feeling mantras, having, again, spiritual counsel to go to. This doesn't feel good to me. Well, okay, well, let's shift it. That's such a cherishing mother, cherishing father energy. And the world around us, Earth Mother is asking those that are ready to blossom, those that are ready to come into cherishing mother, to come into that archetype, to come into that. That's what she's saying. Remember what you have in you, remember who you are, and the parts of us that are frightened, those are the parts that aren't here to do the job that's been asked. I had a session with a client yesterday who was saying, there's just part of me that's so frightened about really coming into this power that's been given to me. And I said, what age is she? What age is she? And I asked the same questions and have done for years. What age is the voice that's saying she's frightened? And she just said, oh my God, she's 14. It's 14-year-old me. And I was like, well, of course she can't do the job that you can do. I was like, you have to call her home, soothe her, settle her, steady her, nap. I said, and then when she's soothed, then you can say, okay, today this is where I do this part of myself, today this is where I share. And that for me is also actually in the magic, in the playfulness, is that when I tend to that wee girl that used to dress up at Halloween and felt that's when it was safe, I can say to her, we're safe every day. We're safe every day, And actually somebody else said to me the other day, God, Gail, you would have been burned for what you're doing today. And my reply was, they would have had to have caught me first.
Yes. I can see you coming.
Yeah, I just thought it's so funny. And I was like, that doesn't frighten me anymore. Again, I think there's so much also, I suppose, in spiritual magical craft terms when we talk about what happened, but actually ours is to choose a different path and to choose a better feeling, a better feeling mantra, to choose a better feeling thought. So few people choose what they think. So few people choose what they think. So few people choose what they feel. It is quite the act of rebellion to choose your thoughts and to choose your feelings. It's quite wonderful, quite wonderful. And that's how we can co-create something new, you know, by bringing a little bit of consciousness to it, a bit of tender devotion, you know, showing up every day. Absolutely, not forcing it, but just feeling in the playfulness of it. What age is the part of me that doesn't feel like they can do this? Well, they probably can't. There's no way 17-year-old Gail can do what 42-year-old Gail is going to be able to do, and rightly so. You know, she'd give it a good go, but it would just get us into lots of trouble.
Yeah.
And actually, and I spoke to my mum about this recently. We've been having, you know, part of also coming home, there's been a lot of healing in the family, a lot of a healing in the lineage that I didn't necessarily know was there, but perhaps perhaps some of my unsettlement, I think, was thinking that there were conversations that needed to be had or something like that. I don't know, and actually that's not necessarily true. But there being this sense of, you know, I spoke to her the other day, and I said, you know, I said, because of the mother that you were and you are to me, I said, with my choice not to have children, I said, my family is enormous as a result of my choice not to have children. I said, my family is enormous. I said, I have so many daughters, and I'm really comfortable to say that now. I said, and so many sisters and so many mothers. I said, I'm just helping so many daughters become their mother. And and I said, and that's because of how you mothered and you mother me. And this is very, very much as a conscious surrendering of my own maiden, you know, to move into my summer and to move into the archetype of healthy feminine, healthy, cherishing mother.
Yeah.
And it was amazing because my mum just said to me, oh, well, I suppose that means I am the crone then. And I was just like, I suppose it does, Mama. I suppose it does. And honestly, you couldn't, 20 years of therapy couldn't buy you that peace.
Yeah.
It was just one of those extraordinary experiences. And I spoke with one of my friends and teachers, Sarah, who is the mother spirit. The spirit mother. I'll have to check that on Instagram. Who's doing extraordinary work with the maiden to mother. And I said it was just such a beautiful conversation, and she said to me, it feels to me like it's the changing of the guard. The change, and I was like, holy shit. And I thought, can you imagine if all women knew that they had that opportunity, the changing of the guard? Because she can relax now. She's been hanging on and hanging on and hanging on, and that's what it felt like, and that's where I was at. And there'd been a wee bit of tension, is too strong a word, but there had been some itchiness, I think, you know. And then, and I just had rehearsed in my mind that this conversation, and then I had a totally different conversation, which was what I've just shared with you. And
the imagined conversation's never the same.
No.
Never.
Single time. And then I had really consciously, like, kind of, and actually I wrote about this morning on Instagram, sort of this idea of this little bird that's with me at the moment. And sort of this little bird had I really just wanted to tap on the window of the cherishing mother archetype inside my own biological mother. So all I had intended before that call was just, let me speak from that place in myself and let me speak to that place in you.
Yeah.
Which in truth is what I do all the time, and in session and in circle. And then it was just met. And so now we have this, just this very almost like walking through the vortex feeling transition of deep peacefulness, because she can sit back and relax. And for the first time ever, we had this lovely sort of exchange of, I said to her, I get what's for the younger generation now and what's not mine anymore, and I'm really happy to let that go. And she was like, there is stuff that's for the youngsters. And she was like, and you know, she was like, you're finding easier and easier ways to do things, because again, in our maiden years, in the page years for men, we think we have all the time in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And well, you know, but we don't allow ourselves to bloom necessarily. And then when we move into this beautiful world of actually blooming, then we realize how we spend our time becomes a very, you know, a very, very different choice. And then when it comes to crone and we're no longer bleeding for the village and all that wisdom comes inside us, and you know, hopefully I'll be fully grey by then and silver and all that magic. You know, there will just be this wonderful thing that I've always dreamt. You know, James and I will live somewhere in the Highlands and people will seek me out, you know, when I'm in my later autumn, winter, and they'll be like, I think Gail is still alive. Like, if you can find her, you should go and sit with her because she'll just sort that shit right out, you know.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
what's not to look forward to about that?
Oh.
You know? And again, it's such a rebellion. It's very anti-patriarchy because it's pro-life at every stage.
Yeah.
You know,
And it's your choices and your thoughts and your path, not being influenced by what the society expects us to do. Behave, little women, do as you're told. We are the powerful ones, we are the bosses, blah blah blah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, and that as well, you know, for me, that was a real part of when we moved into taking our vows for ministry. I had already ordained myself, you know, I had already taken my vows. The fact that I stood in circle in ceremony and was witnessed was another part, but it certainly wasn't all of it. I was very blessed, actually. I was blessed by 3 other women and anointed by 3 other women, and that felt important. That felt really important, and something that I realized actually, and had been really banging on the door of, I think, was just how could it be men that sort of, in, you know, again, inverted commas, ruled faith and religion when they'd never given birth?
Yeah.
You know, how could it be a single God when, how could God give birth if not but with or from the goddess? And perhaps goddess gave birth to God. You know, somebody asked me recently, who do you work for? And I said, God's boss. And they were like, I'm sorry, what? And I, you know, like, I sort of love messing with people when it comes to that, because it's just, you know, it's just kind of like, well, like, what else is it? What else could it be? What's another way to see it? But again, you know, as we come into ourselves, the fact also the word priestess is still mocked, but the word priest is not. You know, if I had priestess, you know, and I do sometimes, depending upon the circles, you know, but again, really priestess, healer, you know, medicine woman, wise one, these are the words that describe. Magician, yes, certainly, because I can see the weavings and the threads of people and what's needed. But you know, one of the things I was reflecting on as well is that so often people come to me and sort of want to hand me their power, and I sort of energetically have to close their hands around their own power and hand it right back to them, and you know, and say, I will never take that from you. Like, I will, and I do not want you to give it to me, because I'm just going to help you remember where your answers are. And there's such a tenderness in that. We can both feel it in our heart space. You know, how ready we are to I'll hand you over my money, I'll hand you over my sensuality, I'll hand you, you know, I'll hand you my body, I'll hand you my mind, I'll hand you my years, I'll hand you my hair color, you know, I'll hand you, you know, kind of everything that comes with it. So that, you know, certainly as I practiced in my 20s, even into my 30s, actually, till a certain point, basically being the perfect patriarchal daughter. You know, I'll disembowel myself to look like what patriarchy in drag, as again my friend Sarah calls it, you know, the magazine industry, you know, the yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, and that's also been my excursion for at least the last year, I've been, you know, where is the patriarchy that's hidden in me? I've been the perfect patriarchal woman, you know, and I no longer will be. So as I'm looking inside myself for those systems, capitalism, patriarchy, racism, you know, you know, rooms that have excluded people, as I look to find all of that in myself, there's more and more peace that's found. And then the rooms that I create and that I gather in, they start to look like the world. They don't just look like me. And the rooms I want to create, the spaces, they must look like the world. They must. Otherwise the systems are still dominating me, and I haven't done the labor. So that's also how I know. It is not easy, but it's very rewarding. And again, that's where our practice comes in, right? That's where our coming to the mat comes in. That's where our support comes in. That's where these conversations come in, because there's an opportunity to really, as one of my Buddhist monks just used to whisper, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up to this big, beautiful life and live it and see what happens from there. And that's, you know, that's really, wherever that will take me, I'm very, very happily acting like Ratty on the river. You know, there's no such thing better than a day spent messing about on the river. So.
And it goes right back to what you were saying at the start about that circular. Everything's part of everything. Everything's much more simple than it needs to be.
Absolutely.
Like, it just reconnects us, and it's that, for me, it's that reminder that we are part of, we are not separate from, because we are very much part of the ecosystem, whereas a lot of the conversation that happens is the ecosystem needs to work for us. No, we are part of that, so we need to work with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And as well, you know, there is it's interesting, there's a few people that have been speaking about collective grief, and I sort of have various thoughts on that, really. I think that white women in particular have started to speak about collective grief, whereas Black women of colour, have felt a grief for centuries and generations, again, through everything that has been experienced: slavery, colonization, the muting of their voices, good God, you know, their beauty, their hair, you know, their families. So I think we have to take responsibility again for our part in finding that in us, and also recognizing where every system, again, the hidden capitalism, patriarchy, racism, you know, indoctrinated organized religion is taught from, you know, a unhealthy masculine, you know, and again, and patriarchy and drag, as my friend Sarah says, you know. I think, you know, we must look to all of that to find it in ourselves, and then to meet it and to take the gift of it, and then allow the rest of it to go into the fire, you know. And again, for transformation, transmutation, you know, for it to be taken to the violet flame, for the highest light, for the highest good of everybody involved. And this is also, I think, where Mother is in the earth, is asking, you know, the women that are ready to move into healthy feminine, to move into it, because spiritual counsel is needed more than ever. But, you know, unhealthy maiden to unhealthy maiden will just make more trouble, you know. And if it's the good kind, that's great, but if it's the kind that sort of just causes individuals or collectives pain, that's difficult, you know. And there's also a real opportunity. Michael Beckwith, you know, he teaches about the 4 levels of consciousness, and it's something I share. I've been coming at it from a divine feminine point of view, and you can move through the layers, and certainly we're seeing a lot of the world being in the kind of to me and by me consciousness, which is also, you know, when we think it's us and we created everything and we manifested everything and it was down to us, and yay, aren't we amazing? And it's very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And again, you know, the color of your skin will also have a lot to do with what you think you manifested. You know, so, you know, privilege and white supremacy absolutely reigns in the indoctrination of the law of attraction teachings too, and it's very important that, again, we be witness to that and find a much more inclusive and allyship way in which to be present to that.
Yeah.
But when we move to the extended levels, which from a seasonal point of view, maiden is spring, for example, and we're often in the to me and the by me consciousness, when we give up the idea of false power and false control, and we move into our summer, and we bloom softly like the rose. And as I often speak about it, the love that perfumes inside each of us is able to be born and to be sniffed, as it were, around the world. We move into through me consciousness when we're in co-creation, as Abraham Hicks would talk about it. We're in co-creation. And there's also as me consciousness when there is no divide between us and the Great Mother. There's no divide between us and the Great Mother. And for me, that through me consciousness is summer, and it's the healthy mother, you know, the healthy archetype. And the as me consciousness is the crone, you know, it's autumn and it's winter, when you just know, you know. I liken that to as well the Oracle from the Matrix when she's baking the cookies, you know, and that's the the as me, the as me consciousness. So again, there's so much magic, there's so much weaving. It is about, really, the gift is giving yourself a little bit of, I think for me, the gift has been giving myself a time of study, you know, time of study, and of sitting with people who are much older than me, and much wiser, you know, and especially if they are in healthy crone. If you've got an 85-year-old who's still sitting possibly in wounded maiden, that's tricky.
Yeah.
You know, but again, as more of us speak and more of us will, and as more of us remember and more of us train, there will be more circles and more places remembering and reminding women that there are different stages, and it's really important that we move through them all.
Yeah.
Because then that, as we were speaking about earlier, that is a life well lived. Knowing that, you know, death will come, and so too will rebirth. And that's nature's way. And again, you know, for me, you know, that's what this ministry is, that's what this devotion is. Easier and easier, lazier and lazier. The more Winnie the Pooh I can become, the better. You know, and and you know, and the wisdom is that, you know, is there's a lovely Winnie the Pooh story when Winnie the Pooh's on his way to Eeyore to celebrate his birthday, and he takes him a pot of honey, and you know, and on the way Winnie the Pooh eats the honey. And I just think the beauty, though, is that when he gets to Eeyore, he doesn't panic. He just says to Eeyore, I brought you an empty pot to put things in.
Genius.
And I just think that's genius, because, you know, and that's the magic. I brought you an empty pot to put things in. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't think of anything more wise.
That's, yeah. It's not, I ate your honey. Sorry. It's interesting you saying that about you want to become more like Winnie the Pooh. When we spoke the last time, you were doing mixed martial arts and various of CrossFit and various other bodies, getting really connected to your physical body. And I know since you've moved to your new home that you've been going out doing your big hikes and stuff like that. Are you still doing these other things, or have you let them go to move into this new space?
No, it's really interesting, actually. I'm not, or not in the same way. I do quite I quite miss the mixed martial arts, because there is a part of me that's an absolute, Amazonian warrior, and
Yeah.
needs to there's a certain kinetic energy that actually, if left undisciplined, is a little bit dangerous as far as I'm concerned. And to that, actually, I think it will be very interesting to see, as a just as a result of especially mixed martial arts and BJJ, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu,
Yeah.
kind of camps closing down, because we were seeing such a rise in divine masculine as a result of men taking their pain to the mat
Yeah.
in BJJ, and so wonderful. But it was really interesting. I began to feel quite overwhelmed and quite unstable. Actually, is probably the right word to say around CrossFit. Because I think there's something that's missing in terms of the spiritual support, ironically, around both of those environments. So in moving, I was able to pause that, and then get into my body in the most natural way possible, walking, hiking. Um, I still do. The person I train with is Claire Gallagher, who is known as the Body Astrologer on Instagram. So she aligns everything to your astrological chart, and she has an amazing program that's called Moon RX, Body by the Moon.
Yeah.
It's just fantastic, so good. So that has been, that has been quite prolific in supporting, because she totally understands my nervous system, and
Yeah.
that's what was happening. I hadn't, in a strange way, I hadn't done the inner work for the outer work. So I think often what can happen is we do start to move and we throw ourselves into things, but actually the inner capacity isn't there to hold the outer capacity. So for me, I had to come back to a really, really simple place. And actually, and dance as well. Basically, anything to do with dance on YouTube or any other places of any kind, of just throwing, my body around and being in it and not worrying what it looks like and not lifting things. That has also just become pleasurable and fun. And then to also adding breath work in, because I think since we last spoke, I did my foundation training in breath work with Nicola Price, who's in the inspirational breath work, I think, on Instagram. And and really learning to breathe just is an absolute game changer as well. My God, it's just like, if we could have everybody playing outside safely, have everybody learning to breathe properly, and have everybody just at least knowing how to make a lovely broth at home.
Yeah.
I really believe there would be such nourishment in all of those things. And Scottish country dancing, my God, Scottish country dancing is just, geez, that is exhausting.
It's heart rate up.
Yeah, 2 hours of that, and God, you see enormous change, and it's so good for your mind health, because you can't think about anything other than the steps. Unfortunately, if you're dancing with people that have been doing it for 70 years, they just grab you and throw you where you're supposed to be going. So
Yeah.
yeah, and swimming, swimming have come back, being in the water is always so important, and we're just, we're surrounded here by the lochs, and that's
Did you go in on New Year's Day?
yes,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah. I went down to, where did we go? We went down to Irvine. I went into the sea at Irvine on New Year's Day.
Yeah, oh, it's so good. And actually, it's something I do want to do more of. I have cold showers every day and have
Yeah.
done for a really long time. And actually, when people often say to me, how are you so calm and centered? I'll say, start taking cold showers, because it does something. And again, if you know how to breathe and you're using cold water therapy, and that was something, those were some of the things that my Kundalini teacher training also gave me was actually, you know, again, the power of commitment and the understanding of cold water.
Yeah.
You know, it just starts to feel normal, and actually that's you getting used to discomfort, and that's Wim Hof's whole, you know, he came through a Kundalini background. That was where he was sort of born from. I mean, how he's experimenting with his own vessel is extraordinary, and certainly not for
Yeah.
everybody, but nonetheless
He's
he
doing
is
amazing things.
absolutely possible for everyone. Again, if the practice is put in, you know, if the
Yep.
practice and the play, and you're working with people who really know what they're doing and who are experienced and have the years, because I think that's so important, you know.
Yeah.
And as we see more and more entrepreneurs reaching for new things, it's wonderful, and they too must all be supported. But certainly, you know, I've never worked with anybody who's got less than probably 10, 15 years under their belt for any type of physical, spiritual, or mental support, you know, or not in a way that I would feel fully held
Yeah.
anyway. And I think that's important, because by that point you've gone through enough of your own life cycles to know
Yeah.
what the hell is going on, and you've also gone through enough cycles with clients or community to notice, it's this, okay, we know what this is.
Yeah. Yeah. And that number, I mean, I've worked now in the health, well-being, fitness arena since 2009, so I've just passed my
Mm,
10 years, and it is just past my 10 years that I'm now starting to feel more comfortable
yeah.
with excuse me, understanding what it is that people are experiencing, and being able to take a step back and not be so dogmatic with my approach about it.
Yes,
It's
yes.
like, right, this needs to be much more holistic, because what's right for one person isn't necessarily right for you. And trying
Mhm.
to encourage all my clients to take that step back and look at themselves to
Mhm.
what's right for you. What are you being drawn to? What, don't do something just because I'm asking you to do it. If
Mhm.
your body tells you straight away this is not right, listen
Mhm.
to that. It's
Mm.
wiser than me.
Yes, and the body never lies. The
Yeah,
body
body does
never
not.
lies. You know, the body only speaks the truth. Our job is to speak the language of the body,
Yeah.
you know, and to really understand what they are saying. And I think that's so true. And you were just, when, you know, kind of to circle around to what you were saying at the beginning about that sense of sort of being witness to my settling into myself and the shift that there has been. I feel like that's really important, because if I was still talking about the same things I'd been talking about 10 years ago, I would be worried about me.
Mm.
You know, if I was still saying to people, this is oh God, look, another decade has passed and I'm experiencing exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
That's a bit of a cause for a wee question mark, you know, when
Mm-hmm.
it comes to, you know, kind of, am I walking my talk? Am I, you know, am I doing it? So I think that's important. Again, in this time when people are looking for guides or, you know, support, coaches, ministers, mentors, priestesses, healers, whatever they're looking for, you know, do the work in the sense of inquire, you know, be curious about the journey of that person, you know, you know, yeah, because it's certainly something that I think, again, have the inner authority. You know, yes, you can like the look of that person, absolutely, but also glamour magic is a thing that is used very much on social media. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, often people are glamoring things through sweet design and other things that they're casting, but what's behind it might not have any, you know, substance.
Yeah.
You may still be hungry, you may still be thirsty. You know, and certainly if people aren't inviting you to return to the well of you and to sip
Mm.
and to savor and to slow, you know, certainly as Sharon Blackie and Clarissa, you know, Pinkhart writes and speaks about, we must return to the wells of ourself. This is our, you know, I think it was the end of 2017 when I went through what I called the burning, um, you know, which was just a 3-week fever and purge that
Mm.
was just, you know, was gifted to me. It was at that point I realized that the fever and the purge was because I'd let my well run dry, you know, and that I was
Yeah.
just in there scooping up mud and silt. and there was nothing, so I had to dig and dig. And I think that's what ministry was for me. That's what 2017 to now were for me. It was a dark night of the soul for the time that I lived in Worthing.
Yeah.
It was a good 3 years of a dark night of the soul. It was digging and digging. There was a feralness to where I was and what I was experiencing. There was a wildness of a lack of nourishment, of a lack of knowing, of handing my power over to so many other people, to not feeling really that it was my voice. I was my own voice thief, and I had to find my own voice freedom. So I think people must recognize these are our stories, and it's important to speak them. But part of the reason I do not speak from the wound anymore is because I've got the gift, and the wound is a scar, and the scar is silver and shiny. And that's the most wonderful place to be.
Yeah.
And again, in this, anytime, not just this time, but anytime, again, we must return to our wells, and we must de-glamour our own lives and notice who we want to work with and who feels safe. And if you feel, again, if anyone ever feels like they're handing their power over, if that teacher does not hand it right back to you, find another teacher, and quickly.
If they're asking for your power.
Yes, if they're asking for it. Oh God, the amount of narcissistic teachers. Oh good Lord. I've done 3 rounds of teacher training for yoga, and I don't teach yoga because I was so brutalized through every one of those experiences. And it took me, again, training informally and formally the last few years, to realize that yoga is so much more than asana, than physical practice. And actually not taught by any of them.
That's what my teacher is very, very. That's what he emphasizes so much. Like I did 200 hours with him 2017 into 18, and then since then we're doing another 100 hours and various other things, and the amount of physical practice that we do in it, the asana, is tiny, minuscule, because it's not about that.
Amazing.
And then I remember saying to him recently, I was like, when I started this yoga journey, I was like, oh yeah, after that 200 hours, I'm going to know. As I got to the change of the 200 hours, I went, I know nothing about anything. Oh shit. And I think for me, that's what yoga teacher training has been very much about. You can have all this knowledge, but there's no wisdom. The wisdom is all inside you, and you need to let go of. I'm somebody who loves to collect knowledge. I love learning. I love reading. When all this lockdown stuff happened, the first thing I did was get online and sign up to numerous courses to learn. I did a dissection course. I got to witness a cadaver being layered back and seeing how that all happens, and I'm in awe and mind blown and going, we know nothing about the body. Like, there's so much going on in there that we can never know, because it's just what it is. I'm doing various other courses, but my panic mode, my way of dealing with fear is to hunker down and fill my head with knowledge, because if I have knowledge, I have power, which I know is not the truth. It's my comfort blanket.
Well, and there's such beauty in that, because where I'm really comfortably coming from now, and in anything I'm teaching around the unlocking, so much of all of my work in 2020 has been called something related to unlocking or commanding. And in my Prosperity Unlocked group, which is the first group program, the fellowship as I've been calling it, one of the most important teachings is, again, another Holy Trinity, which is the 3 centers: the head, the heart, and the hara. And the head, the heart, and the hara are, we will try and get our head around everything first, and then we might remember the heart and the hara. So, you know, the head is to think, the heart is to feel, and the hara, the dantiya, and the center, the gut, is to know. So to think, to, you know, to feel, to know. And from a mystical element, it is stone to water to wine. Stone is the reading. Stone is the reading. And then the knowledge drops into the heart, and we read it for a second time. And then the knowledge drops into the belly, and we read it for a third. That's why I also really recommend reading things 3 times. You know, it's why the power of 3 is referred to in witchcraft and womancraft, and you know, in magic. The power of 3 was ours long before it belonged to Charmed and the Charmed ones.
One of my mum's favourite shows. She absolutely loves
Oh my
Charmed.
God, I love it too. I love it too.
So good.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, head to water to wine. You know that, and also that is the conscious Christ teachings. That's the Magdalene and the Christ teachings. You know, stone to water to wine, to know thyself, as the Magdalene said. You know, to have gone to the underworld and to come through the other side. Really important. Really important. So absolutely, because we, you know, we've been sold that knowledge is power, but it's wisdom. It's wisdom. And again, and patriarchy, anti-life, will have us going into overproductivity, capitalization, industrialization, you know, the raping and the fracking of the planet. We saw it all over the world, overproductivity in the first reaction to independent retreat. We saw it in the incarceration language, lockdown. We saw it in the pharmaceutical language. We've seen it in everything that has been indoctrinated with anti-life. But actually, what Corona has invited us to do is a big old time out from mama. Go to your room, children.
Grounded.
Yeah, you're grounded. Yeah. And you know, and so we hear the birds, and so the fish come back, and so the earth stills. One of my favorite things at the moment is, you know, the grass that's beside the pavements and the roads. It's all overgrown, and the wildflowers are just free. There's you know, there's not a school playground that has been hacked back. You know, it's just so wonderful, this sense of, look how much growth happens, you know, when it's
you
allowed.
step back and let it.
Yeah, when you step back and you let it. Yeah. So again, stone to water to wine. It's also, you know, for me, they're like 3 wee eggs that sit above in a little row, you know, and it is that place. And for me, I also sometimes I bring it into a little bit of bonus, if you will. I sometimes, often when I meditate, I come, you know, stone to water to wine to feet, and then to hands, you know, so stone. So if anybody's also feeling unbalanced or a little bit in or out of themselves, a wonderful practice is to imagine your breath coming down through your head, down through your heart, down through your belly, and down through your feet. And truly that will get you back into yourself very quickly. And if you have any feeling of discombobulation or headachiness around that, it will just show you how often you're up and out as opposed to down and in. You know, because the way is through. The way is always through, and it must be through ourselves. You know, we are the chalice, and beautifully so.
I'm so glad I went and got a pad and pen when I was coming on to speak to you. I never usually do this, and I was like, I need a pen and a pad and pen for talking to Gail, because there'll be things I want to write down, and I have paper covered in notes. Like I could sit and listen to you talk all day long. I'm aware that we've been on for nearly an hour and a half. Your time is much appreciated and valued. Where is the best place for people to come follow you and your work and stuff?
Yeah, so I would say, so on the website, which is just my name, so Gail Loveshock loveshock.com, you'll find sign up for my weekly newsletter. So there's
Just
always, oh, thank you. There's always medicine in there. You'll also be able to sign up for Sanctuary, which is every Wednesday night, 7 till 8 p.m. BST or GMT, depending upon when people are listening to this. And that's free. It's donation based. There's always a meditation, some teachings, a lot of humor, just the usual. And then on Instagram, I'm Gail_Loveshock, and that's really my daily prescription pad. So I'll share what's happening in the world of me and around me and what's inspiring me. And then, you know, you'll be able to find out more about the classes, the group program, taking a deeper dive with me, one-to-one ceremony, all the sections of life, the birth, the death, and the rebirth, stone, water to wine.
Yeah. Amazing. I will put those links into the show notes.
Amazing, thank you. Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to share or say before we wrap this up?
No, I think this has been a very full and enjoyable conversation. So if you feel cold, listen to it not once but thrice and see what happens.
Yes. So thank you so much for being on the podcast. Thank you so
Pleasure.
much.